This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. I want to thank my latest reviewer, Reeds55 from the Netherlands on the Apple Podcast Store. Thank you so much for that review. Remember, you can rate and review the podcast on the Apple Podcast Store. You can rate the podcast on Spotify and subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening. Here's another invitation to the Deconversion Anonymous community that is on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/deconversion. Please join every Tuesday night at 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. We discuss the previous week's podcast. Especially if you connect with one of the guests and you want to hear more of their story, come join us on Tuesday nights and be a part of the ongoing community. Special thanks to Mike T for editing today's show. On to today's show. This week we have a special treat. Arline, who is our community manager and all-around foundational person for the podcast, is guest hosting with two of her friends from university, Marissa and Raven. Arline, Marissa, and Raven all went to the same university. They were all part of a Christian organization called Campus Outreach. They have all since gone through some level of deconstruction, although they have each landed in different positions. There are so many similarities in their story. So Arline was the perfect person to do the interview. Because these three women are friends, I think this feels really intimate and powerful. So I'm excited to share with you. Here is Arline, Marissa, and Raven to tell their stories.
Hello, Marissa and Raven. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Hi. Hello.
I have been looking forward to this interview for a long time. I'm excited to hear your stories, and I have learned a lot from both of you, and I have gotten to know both of you for over 10 years, I believe. So this is exciting for me. When David asked me if I wanted to host, I really wanted to have just a discussion with Black women, especially who have not necessarily deconverted, but may have, but who are on a journey deconstructing, pulling apart the faith that they had for a long time and just seeing where they are now. So, Marissa, if you don't mind, would you start and just tell us about the spiritual environment that you grew up in?
All right. I grew up calling myself a Christian. Every summer, my mom would send my cousins and I to this Christian camp, and it was a fun experience, but also, really rooted in scripture memory and just kind of teaching kids that the Bible could be fun, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for exactly what it was. And then I got to college, and so I became part of what's called Campus Outreach, and it was through them that I realized, what they'll tell you is, being a Christian is a relationship, not a religion, and so building a relationship with who Jesus is, and I really do believe that God worked through a lot of that mess to really shape my heart and mold me in a way that was beneficial. I enjoyed my time in college. I really did. I met some of the people who are to this day, 10 years post-college, my best friends. And I will never be regretful of that. And then junior year of college, I went to a camp with the Navigators, which is another ministry that reaches more than just college students. And I remember talking with one of my fellow counselors, and her saying, "Isn't Campus Outreach a cult?" And I was like,
"Oh, wow."
You can't see me, but my jaw literally dropped. I thought, no, it's not a cult. What are you talking about? So, that is where the seed was planted in my head that maybe Campus Outreach wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And I will say, towards my junior and senior year, there were more questions that I had that I felt like weren't getting answered. They were just kind of pushed to the back burner. There was this idea of if you're not following blindly, you're not being faithful. And I thought, well, pardon my French, fuck it. I guess I'm not being faithful. So that, that also sparked a lot of questions for me regarding my faith that really I didn't start unhashing until honestly in the last 2 years.
Yeah, that's a lot. I'm familiar with campus outreach. That's how my husband and I met, actually at the same school. Raven?
So I grew up culturally Christian. Um, with my mom was my grandfather is a deacon. So, my mom grew us up very strict with Christianity, and also she's a military kid, so, just very strict in general. But my dad, he's like a total California hippie. So whenever I would go out in the summer to San Francisco, it would be like totally different from being in the South. So I'm going like church all the time in the South, and, all the Christian stuff, and then going out to Cali, and none of that's happening, and everything's totally liberal. So, I was Christian, but it wasn't really all that like serious to me. It was just more of a, just be a good girl kind of thing. Um, so then I went to college, just like you guys, and went to Valdosta State. Got sucked into, well, not, I don't want to say sucked into campus outreach, but I met some really great people in campus outreach. Just like Marissa was saying, and just like you, Arline, met some awesome people that we still know today, that we're still met with today. And got involved with that group and learned about, like Marissa said, not just religion, but a relationship. And seeing what it was like to just kind of be immersed in not Christianity, but just like having a relationship with Christ and having a relationship with other Christians, which I honestly had never really had before. And it was interesting to me, and it was a new experience. So I really dove headfirst into it, to a point where it maybe even in my head became a bit cult-like. Maybe I was making it a bit cult-like. But I do tend to tell people that I was involved in a cult in college. But it's also a cool thing. And that's not a cool thing to say, but it's like, oh, you're involved with a cult. But so yeah, I did that throughout my college years, and then I stayed in the South, doing my Christian thing after college. And well, I would say that my deconstruction began probably about 3 to 5 years ago. I was questioning a lot while I was still living in Georgia, before I moved out to California. And some things were happening politically and socially, and it was also causing me to question my faith because of how people were responding or not responding. So that's kind of how my spiritual journey is tapering somewhere.
No, that's awesome. Different people have told their stories on the podcast, and the politics of the last 5 or 6 years is often part of the story. Marissa, you said there was a seed planted when you were part of the Navigators, but even since then, what was, I guess, perhaps the catalyst? Was it one big thing that happened that made you start pulling things apart even more? Or sometimes David will say it's death by 1,000 cuts, just lots of little things.
I think for me, it was like just I think, yes, the catalyst was started in 2012 when someone asked me if campus outreach was a cult. That's when that seed was planted. And then it probably sprouted a little bit more in 2016 with the presidential election, and just seeing how many Christians, I think a lot of people whether Democrat or Republican, can get very swept up in their party. I'm not going to pretend like it's just one party, but a lot of people can, and they can get very, I'm Republican through and through. I don't care who's on the ticket. That's how I'm going to vote, or I'm Democrat through and through, and that's how I'm going to vote. Right. And so it wasn't that people were continuing their that policy through voting red. It was the adamant insistence that like Trump was like the second Jesus to them. That's exactly the feeling I got. And I just think I looked around as a Black woman and I thought, I don't think I fit in with these people anymore. And I would like to note too that Valdosta State, it's where we all went. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty well mixed demographic down there, which is surprising because it is in South Georgia. But the church that we went to and the ministry that we were part of was predominantly white. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there were political statements that were made that made it seem like the only way to vote was Republican. And I do believe that some of that was the fact that we were in a primarily white situation. So yeah, just seeing the way that people were so adamant about voting for Trump and how he was the best presidential candidate, I think really kind of put a bad taste in my mouth in 2016. And then he won, and then people were just just this ever-present determination that this is exactly what the Lord has for America. Mm-hmm. And then I think that's when I began to see that it wasn't patriotism, it was nationalism. Yes. That was fueling a lot of that, and how it had made its way into the church. Mm-hmm. Because I still believed at that point, I still believed the best in people. I still wanted to believe the best in people. And I think in 2020, just seeing the Arbery case and specifically the case that it wasn't even a case with the man in Central Park who was just bird watching and asked the woman to put a leash on her dog. I think that's when I really was just in shock of the way that Black people are still treated in America. And it was my assumption that as Christians who are told to love thy neighbor, that would be that other Christians would see the value in that. And then continuing to George Floyd, that, Christians are quote unquote pro-life. And I wasn't seeing that. I wasn't seeing the grace and generosity extended to people who looked like me. So then I really started to think, well, is there a caveat that I'm missing? Is there an exception to the rule? And the only thing I could see is that there's an exception to the rule if you're not white. And so I think that's when I started to draw back. And I will say throughout this whole time, I have never doubted who God is. But I've started to doubt a lot about who people have told me God is. Those events have made me question what I've been taught in the last, 14 years.
Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to watch the same people you're in ministry with, the people you're under, the people who are spiritual authorities, suddenly, at least it seems suddenly, not see that your whole self is worthy of love and belonging and existing in the world in a way that doesn't have to be afraid to exist in the world. Yeah, watching that clash is that I imagine is very hard. Raven, tell me your story.
Pretty much everything Marissa said. But no, seriously, it was a lot of different things. I think when it was like in 2012, the death of Trayvon Martin, I think kind of started everything for me. and it was everyone's reaction and their non-reaction and their reaction to our reaction, like, as you know, as the Black community, our reaction to it. um it was a lot of, well, if you just don't talk about it, it'll go away, when it came to racial injustice and racism in general. And I'm like, this is a sin. Like, aren't you guys against sin? Like, aren't we supposed to be repenting of sin? Like, that was the whole point, I thought. But no, they didn't see it in that way. So I was like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure God would see it this way. So why aren't you seeing it in this way? So I think that was like the first thing that kind of came to my mind, like, maybe these people don't know God that well, because I don't think an all-knowing and all-loving, all-powerful God would be okay with his people being okay with this. You know what I mean? Um, and then, like, some personal things started happening in my family. I have my second cousin came out as being as gay, and her 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 side of the family just completely shut her off. She has nieces and nephews she's never seen. She hasn't talked to her siblings, hasn't talked to her grandmother, hasn't talked to any of her family, except for, like, us and a few others, for a little over 10 years now. And that really bothered me, the way that our Christian, that side of our Christian family were treating her. And yeah, it's still messed up. But that also really just was a tough thing to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And then like Marissa said, the election of Trump. And initially I was thought there was no way that Christians would vote for him. Not at all. Like, look at this
Yep.
guy. There's no way. Girl. I remember saying to you, Arline, I was like, there's no way that people would actually vote for him. He's not going to be president. And you were like,
I, I,
That was your exact reaction. I was like, wow, she
uh,
doesn't know. But girl, it happened.
I am not known for my hope in humanity at this time.
Girl, I was looking at things through colored glasses, I think, for a very long time in Christianity. And sometimes I blame myself for doing that, and not seeing the reality of how people are. But I think Trumpism in the church, and in America, just really made me back away. Like, oh, I want no parts of this at all, at all. If this guy is you're acting like he's your Lord and Savior, I don't want any parts of it. There's nothing I want. Like, not at all. So yeah, it was that kind of thing. So.
You've both mentioned the difficulty with church, and I'm assuming white church people.
Yeah.
You've been part of campus outreach and been in white church spaces. When or how is your relationship to the idea of a God? Like, how has that changed over time versus
Yeah.
just like the church world? Does that question make sense?
So my ideas of God, I would call myself an agnostic atheist. I'm still trying to figure things out a little bit. I'm open to, I guess, spiritual experiences. I feel like I'm on a path to enlightenment, but that doesn't necessarily coincide with, like, church and church people and religion. It's just like, what feels good to the soul, what is good for the soul, what is good for other people, that kind of thing. So I mean, while I'm not totally anti-religion, because I think that there's some good parts, some good things related to religion. Like there's some good verses that I still, go back to in the Bible. There's some great things about Buddhism. There's some great things about like many religions. But kind of those things that are, I've learned to just kind of deconstruct and cherry pick, which a lot of Christians do, or a lot of religious people do anyway. What I feel is good for me and good for humanity, I guess I should say.
Yeah. I would say I don't think that my view of God hasn't changed at all. I definitely think it's changed. But I do still believe in the God that I've worshipped, from the beginning. Like I said before, I still think it's just now I'm questioning what people have told me about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm questioning how best to worship him. And in one of those things is just, in Christianity, part of the worship is tithing, and specifically tithing to the church. And I saw someone on TikTok the other day who mentioned how she tithes, which is to give back to the community in financial ways when she notices that someone needs something, like someone needs their power, their light bill taken care of, they need groceries, they need whatever. And I just thought, I think I'd rather do that. I'd rather do that than to give money to a church ever again. So like I said, it's not that I think that God has changed, but how I worship him definitely has. And I think there's a lot that I still need to figure out. I need to figure out with my husband, because at some point we do want to have kids, and I don't know what I want that relationship to look like as far as religion. And I don't, not that I want to wait to have kids until I have it all figured out, but I definitely don't want to bring my trauma into, their young, impressionable lives without figuring out what exactly do I believe, and how do I think that needs to look for our family. Because I'm not sold anymore on the idea that, we'd be in church all the time. I do miss the community a lot. That's one thing that has been a struggle here, especially in the last 2 years, just not being able to socialize with people anymore, or not anymore, but as often. But also, like, what friends do we have? Not very many. So I'm not saying, oh, I want to go back to church just because I want friends. I know that friends are tangible outside of the church. But yeah, there are certain aspects of it that I miss, and I would like to be a part of our lives. But I actually was talking to my therapist yesterday, and I was just like, there are certain phrases that I hear people say now that are just off-putting to me. And it's because of the culture and society that we were, brought up in. It just makes me question other people's intentions. And I think that's the part that's hard for me.
Do you mind, can you elaborate, either you or Raven?
Just things like, and please bear in mind, some of the things that people have said to me, I still love these people, and they've come back over the last few years and said, like, hey, I was really wrong to have pushed you into this. But just like, I'm thinking, well, for you, sanctification, even the word glorification makes me want to throw up. I still think that prayer is a good thing to do, but when people are like, did you pray about it? I literally want to punch someone in the face.
Oh my God.
Just get out of my, get out. Yeah, it's just things that were so haphazardly used in the past that now they've lost all their meaning. They've lost any weight that they once had.
Just to piggyback off that, Marissa, when people say just pray about it or just give it to the Lord or things like that, and especially like in my field, in the medical field, I hear people say that so much, and I'm like, no, you can actually change this. Ways for this to get better, to reverse. You don't just have to give it to the Lord. You can actually do some real world application, and it can. Yeah, that phrase, give it to God or pray about it. No, I mean, and I'm not against prayer at all. Like mindful meditation, prayer, whatever you want to call it. Like I'm all for it, right? But there has to be, some action. There has to be some application, and sometimes it's that lack of like accountability, or that may not be the right word, but it's just like that lack of, oh well, we'll just give to the Lord and let Him deal with it. It's like no, you gotta do something about that.
Yeah.
It can often seem like that's what you're doing. Like, just pray about it, or without actually then. I had a friend since I have deconverted who told me, she was like, just look at prayer. Because I saw some people on some kind of post about they were all met in the center of town to pray together over racial reconciliation. And it made me really angry inside. And I was trying to figure out, what's happening inside my body. Why is this happening? And I realized she was saying, just look at it as they're like preparing their hearts to go do a thing. And I said, that's great, except I'm pretty sure they're not going to go do a thing.
Right.
They're waiting on supernatural help to do some kind of magic in the world that doesn't include calling out, white supremacy, having difficult conversations, voting in such a way that will not, harm entire groups of people.
Right.
And so that was what I realized was triggering about the praying thing, was it is often the end thing that they do rather than, and I'm sure I was like that too.
Can I just add? I feel like prayer is something that a lot of times Christians encourage one another to do when it's something they just genuinely don't care about. Like if a president that they like that you don't like gets elected, then they're going to say, well, you should just pray about it because we need to honor whoever the Lord has elected to be our president. But if the scripts are reversed, then they are literally throwing a fit. And that was another thing that was just really off-putting to me, is that there are times when it's appropriate for me in my sorrow and my pain to just pray about it. But anytime something that they don't like happens, we have to do something. Wait, I thought we were a family of prayer.
Right.
You want to come over to my house and pray? Let's do that. Yeah, there's so much. This is acceptable to pray about. This is something that we have to like actively seek to fix. And especially when it comes to racially motivated stuff, it seems like I have to pray and you guys can just go on with your Nina calling everybody a freaking N-word.
Yeah.
Get over it.
Yeah. Racial reconciliation is not a gospel issue, but abortion is a gospel issue. That kind of.
But it's only a gospel issue until said baby is born, and then good luck finding formula because I can't help you. I have a mission trip to go to.
I have to go to Cambodia. Excuse me.
And this is not to be desensitive to anyone who is looking for form, but I genuinely feel like that's how they behave. If it's not valuable to them, if they don't see it as, which is another thing that really, I know that I'm going backwards, but really frustrated me is I remember seeing, I'm sure you guys probably saw it too, but it was a cartoon of a news person pointing a camera at like something like a small animal, like a bird, and it said Black Lives Matter, but then behind the camera there's this giant elephant, and it's like what did it say, child trafficking or something, like basically insinuating everyone's focusing on Black Lives Matter, but we should be really focusing on child trafficking. And I'm like, could you imagine if in a church a pastor like got up and was talking about the need to feed the homeless, and a youth pastor got up and was like, but we need to feed our kids too. Like, how absurd that would be.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the church, it would be crazy to think that one need overshadows another need. They are both valuable things. And I think that was another thing that frustrated me is I get that we can't all bear the burden of every single thing that needs to be addressed, but you dismissing what I need to be addressed is horseshit.
Yeah.
And I don't appreciate it.
So nobody's necessarily landed in a spot. This is where I'm going to be forever. Marla Taviano talks about how everyone's on a journey, even if it's not, quote, a spiritual journey, but you don't reach a spot and then land. Otherwise, you become fundamentalist in a new way.
Mm.
And you have all the answers, and this is where, I'm going to be. And how are you guys finding anything that you miss from when you were in church? How are you guys finding that now?
That was the toughest part. One of the toughest parts about whenever I started to deconstruct and stop going to church was I did miss community. But then I was just kind of thinking about, like, okay, what exactly are you missing? Are you just missing being around a group of people with similar interests? Are these people really your friends? Are these people really there for you? Like, who are these people to you? And then I, was just kind of asking myself, like, yes, you do need community, but you need community with the right people and the people who are always been there for you. Not necessarily people who always agree with you, but you know, just your backbone. You know what I mean? So I didn't really find any much more of community. I just kind of stayed with the people that I knew and the people that I trusted and the ones I knew I could go to, which is a very small group of people. But I'm okay with that. Like, I am at a place in my life where I don't need to be friends with everyone and I don't need to go out every weekend with everyone. It's, and I don't need to go, to Sunday um, Bible study and what's that thing, Sunday school and church and everything just to see and to let people know that I love them. You know what I mean? So, like, yeah, I did miss it at first, but now I'm just like, I got my people. I'm good.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on off of what Raven said is having to redefine what that community is and what it will look like, and then just to be honest with myself. I told Arline earlier I'm going back to school for nursing, so Raven, I'm coming for you. But I don't have a lot of time. Right now, I'm working two jobs, like a full time job and a part time job. Tomorrow, I start a summer class, and I have that full time job and part time job and that summer class. And so when I come home, I am exhausted, and I'm an introvert, and I don't want to hang out with people.
Yep.
It's a struggle sometimes for me to want to hang out with my husband. And not because I don't love him, just because I'm like, I need some time where it's just me and I don't have to worry about anybody else. So I think just remembering, even if we were going to church consistently right now, there's no way I could adequately pour into a community. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
So just realizing this is just the stage that I'm at, and hopefully in a few years when I'm done with this, and maybe my husband has figured out what he wants to do, then we will, be able to hang out because we do have friends. We do. We just don't get to see them very often. So maybe we will be able to hang out with them, or we'll make new friends, or we'll move. But I think just sometimes there's that need for me to remind myself, this is exactly where you'd be, even if you were in church.
I've had to figure out that in person I have a very limited amount of friends, but online I have been able to find lots and lots of people just that you share interests with, people that want to read the same books that you do, or um, I've tried to get my husband to be part of online community things, but he's very similar. He's like, meh, I'm not interested. I don't want to meet more people. He's got his small little group, and I think that's something that in the church we're taught is you need to at least be acquainted with everyone who comes. If you're at a, 150 amount of people in a church, or at least, be very close with your small group. And what's really hard about those kinds of situations is you don't get a choice. You're supposed to just magically mesh with this group of women or
Mm.
men and women and trust them and share all your deepest things with them. And oh, those are not good situations. It's nice to be out of that and be able to, how did you say it, Marissa? Just redefine what community looks like
Mm.
for yourself and for your husband. What are the benefits of where you are now? What do you not miss about having to do church or having to believe a certain way or do things, live a certain way?
I feel like I have I have come into a sense of a sense of self. Um it's hard to explain, but I feel like I can just be Raven, you know what I mean, and not be this idea of what Raven should be, and this perfect Christian girl who for 33 2 years of my life I was kind of presenting, but now I can just be free and loving, and I can just be me, and I think that's the most liberating part of it. It's the best part of it. Um, I like I like that I can have fun and not feel like it's sin. You know,
Hmm.
um, I can go dancing, I can go travel. I don't have to just be married with a bunch of kids, and I don't have to do all these things to be accepted.
Hmm.
I can just be me. And also, not having to get up early on Sundays has been really great. Like,
Amen.
that's pretty awesome. Because in college, when we were, in campus outreach, it was like Wednesday worship night or whatever, Thursday prayer group, small group, and then Sunday church. It was something all the time. And then even coming out, it's something all the time. And it's just like, just being able to and like you, Marissa, I work 2 jobs too. Like, it's having this day that I'm just off and I don't have to do anything. It's great. Like, Jesus rested on the seventh day. He didn't go to church. I'm just saying. He rested.
Leave me alone.
Yeah, I'm up at 7:30. Gosh.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I feel the same way. At, when Eric and I were first dating, we would go to different churches trying to figure out which one we wanted to be a part of. And then the pandemic happened, and like I would make us wake up and watch sermons, even though we both hate watching sermons online. Like I would prefer to listen to one while I'm cooking. The same thing for him, listen to it while you're doing something else. And we were both miserable in that. And then that, we stopped doing that. And yeah, I just enjoy waking. We only get to wake up together 2 times a week. And sometimes it's not even those 2 days because I have to work at my second job or he is on call and he gets a call at 6 o'clock in the morning and then he's gone all day. So I just enjoy like waking up and having breakfast with my husband 2 days a week and not rushing to go anywhere.
Yeah.
I also, what Raven said of not having something on your calendar all the time, or the guilt from not having something on your calendar all the time. If I feel like when I was part of a church, another thing that really bothered me is how much pressure they put on singles to either get married or help out with people who were married who had 7 kids. And it's like, you had 7 kids on your own. And if you need help taking care of those, you need to talk to your mom because I'm single and I got to do my laundry and cook by myself. No one's helping me with any chores. You figure that out. You need a date night. I'm really sorry. You're going to have to pay someone $20 an hour to watch them 7 kids. But yeah, just like there's no one trying to guilt trip me into the fact that I don't have any kids, so I need to be helping out people with kids. And the thing is, I love children, and I would love to help people out with kids. I just don't want to be guilted into it. If I volunteer to babysit your kids for free, I take it and run. But if I don't, if you need a babysitter and I'm really tired, then you're gonna have to pay me because my time is worth something. And so I just don't miss that. I don't miss someone trying to get me to do something that I don't really want to do. Because I feel like that led to so much bitterness in me doing those things. It looks really good on paper. And I think a lot of times I did it because I was single and I'm like, what Christian boy is going to see me doing this and think, oh yeah, she's a godly woman. Like, so I don't miss any kind of, no one's guilting me into doing things. Am I still figuring out how not to guilt myself because I'm not doing anything? Yes. But yeah, I would say that there's a lot more time for me to attempt to enjoy my free time instead of feeling guilty.
I was gonna say back to the thing about like people and having their kids and you being the single woman in the church. That was one of the hard things about being in the church, especially like you said, like the church that we came from, the evangelical church, where it's mostly non-minority white people. Yeah, we're just gonna say white people. And it's just like, where do many of my friends as single Black women, where do we fit into that? Because reality, we most of us were single for a very, very long time, and it just seemed like we were. I hate to use this word, but mammies almost. Does anybody know what a mammy is? Yeah,
Yes.
we were just kind of used as mammies as a little bit, but yeah, it was like difficulty finding that place where you fit in. Yeah.
I remember telling a friend when I was still single, I find it really hard, like dating in a predominantly white church as a Black woman, non-existent. And I told this is a friend of mine, she's white, and I said, white men want to date white women, Black men want to date white women, and there's no, where do Black women belong? Where do we fit? And she was gracious and just listened. She doesn't have an answer. I don't have an answer, but it adds another layer of feeling unwanted. And to add to what Raven said of, if we can't fit you into any of these boxes that we already have, can you go watch our kids?
Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of that has to do, even though a lot of people in the Black community hate the effects of white supremacy, they still act in it. So that, when you're talking about, white men want to marry white women and Black men want to marry white women, and a lot of it is shrouded in white supremacy, I believe. And I'm not going to completely, blame that on the church, but, I don't think the church makes it any better either. I don't know. It's complicated.
I think it was something that, because again, in a predominantly white church, there are very few women of color in leadership, in particular, that it was just overlooked. Right. And I want to clarify, it's not that I have any hard feelings towards someone falling in love with whoever they fall in love with, right. But it was a common theme that, even just being asked out on dates, like I said, just that never happened when I was in college, when I was post-college. But every single one of my white friends got asked out on at least one date. And so that was another thing that just felt very isolating.
That is hard. I was oblivious to this. Like I was in my little white bubble at the time. Even when I was in campus outreach, which I'm a good bit older than both of y'all, there were only maybe one or two Black women now that I think about it, and one Black man. Yeah. He's not even straight, so that that eliminated one black man in the group. Thinking about that, how was purity culture different for you ladies than perhaps it would have been for Donnie and me? Did you have that feel of purity culture in your churches growing up? How was it in college? Was it different?
Yeah, I grew up, never, my mom or my dad never talked about sex at all with me. They pretty much just said, don't have sex until marriage. And me being the good, agreeable kid, I was like, okay. And honestly, I hadn't really met any men that I wanted to have sex with, you know, throughout my middle school, high school, even college years. I don't know. I was so ingrained in purity culture just growing up that when I, started getting more and more into, religion and everything like that, it just seemed like something that was very natural for me. And even though I had those desires, it just, I was just always told to suppress them. And, one day a man will come along and you'll be able to express all of your desires to him. And so,
Yeah, I don't know if I could thinking about who Marissa was in her college years. I would have just liked a man to have initiated a friendship more than anything else. I don't think that sex was even really on my mind back then. Yeah, and I did think that it made it more difficult because we were supposed to wait and let a man initiate. It just felt like I'm sitting here and I'm doing all the right things, but nothing's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would say that sexually there was no sexual frustration in college, but maybe just frustration that like if I did initiate to a guy just to try to develop a friendship, they responded as if I wanted to have sex with them. And I remember my college roommate and I talking about like, gosh, I can't even talk to them without thinking that I'm trying to sleep with them. Sir, get your head out of your behind. You're not that cute. And you're kind of short. It's fine. It's totally fine for men to be short. But just like, yeah, it just turned every single friendship into something that was overanalyzed. And I genuinely don't think it needed to have been that complicated. And speaking to friends who didn't grow up in that or who didn't experience that in college especially, they didn't have that. They didn't have those issues. They were just friends with the opposite sex, and it was fine.
Yeah, purity culture definitely made relationships with the opposite sex very weird and very strained. Like, you can't dance in front of them, you can't wear this in front of them, you can't do that because you're not guarding their heart. And it's just like, is that
which is another frustrating thing is that, something that I realized all these years later is we talk about how, God made man the head of the household, the head of the church, and yet he is so flippin' sensitive to my shoulders. I have questions. Why? Why do I have to protect this great head of the church from my belly button?
Should he really lead us if
if he's that sensitive? I see his belly button all the time and I'm not over here swooning. I see his shoulders all the time and I'm like, cool, you need some sunblock? And if I show my belly button or shoulders, it's the end of the world.
I know.
So I think that's another thing that as an adult I'm like, okay, I think this was something that was just blown way out of proportion. If you can't guard your own heart, maybe you need to stay inside. And that was another frustrating thing is that they take us to the beach every summer and they're like, girls, cover up. It's hot. We are in Daytona, Florida. I'm not covering up. All these boys, why don't you go pluck out your eyes? I don't see anybody modeling that part of the Bible yet. Sorry for my rant. I feel very passionate about it.
Oh gosh.
It's almost like it's not actually about obeying the Bible, but controlling what
Women.
women can and cannot do. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know.
What? I'm shocked.
Oh my
I
God.
know. It's a new idea. It's a new one.
This is a strange concept. Never heard of that.
Something that I have found beyond being a Christian, beyond being religious and things like that is just I can trust myself. Like I can trust my own judgment. That was something unexpected that I didn't expect. Have you, either of you, found that, as women we're taught you have to ask your husband or you have to ask the pastor or you have to submit? There's just not a lot of like trusting your own judgment about anything. Pray about it. Or could you already do that? Could you already trust yourself? Or have you found that you can trust yourself more now? Or learning to trust yourself?
I think that's an interesting point because when Eric and I first got married, I'm 3 years older than him. And there are just things that I know how to do better than he knows how to do. And there are things that he knows how to do that he knows, better than I know how to do. But in my cult mindset, I thought he's the head of the household. He's supposed to be taking care of the money. But I'm better at taking care of the money. So why in the world would I not just take care of the money? Why would I insist that he do something he's not good at? And so I feel like that's been something that has, it's only been 2 years, but we're still figuring out. And I'm still unlearning. He doesn't have to handle and it would be ridiculous, in my opinion, for one person to handle everything. I feel so bad when I hear about these women whose husbands die and they're like, he took care of everything. I'm like, you don't know how to pay any bills? You should have learned that, and it's not, I can't completely blame her. It's the culture that she was brought up in. But like, I am thankful that I didn't get married until 30 so that I know how to do that stuff on my own. But there are so many women, especially in the Christian culture, who get married at 22 and you go straight from their parents taking care of their things to their husband taking care of their things. And they don't know how to do that stuff on their own. And to me, that is terrifying because, yeah, you did pledge your lives to one another, but people die every day. So, yeah, I just feel like I'm unlearning this idea that my husband has to be the one to handle everything. Not if he's not good at it. I don't want him touching it. Let me do it.
Yeah.
In the same way that I wouldn't ask him to bake a souffle if he was just going to burn it. I don't know how to bake a souffle either, but it's absurd. It's an absurd idea to force someone into learning something that they're just not good at. That's okay. That's part of the beauty of being in a partnership. I didn't get married just so someone could change my oil every 3 months.
Right. I still struggle with trusting myself. And it gives me a lot of anxiety, honestly, just because when you trust yourself, you trust the journey that you're going on, you trust your path that you're going on. And when you don't trust yourself, you don't trust any of that. And it makes the future and everything just be so overwhelming because you can't navigate things slowly because, oh, what if this happens? And what if this happens? What if this, like your mind is just constantly on a hamster wheel. And so, with trusting my own judgments, trusting what I want from my life, trusting how I see my relationships, and it's been tough. It's been really tough. I'm very fortunate to have people around me, my friends, my family, my boyfriend, who are very understanding. It's difficult for me to just kind of stay calm and trust myself and trust the journey and just kind of let it go. You know what I mean? Just let it go. So that's been a tough thing. And I think that it does have to do with always needing to have an advisor whenever I had a question about something. I have to ask my small group leader. I'd ask the church, I'd ask God, I'd pray about it. I'm always asking everybody else. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, just seeking guidance, nothing at all. But in the end, you have to, do what's right for you. And it's not going to look the same for everybody. And you have to be okay with that. So
I would also like to say, just to echo what Raven just said, is that it is really hard sometimes to look down the road and say, like, I think this is the road I want to be on, but not have that, like, small group leader or pastor to affirm that. And you realize, I actually don't need anyone to affirm this because I can afford it and my bank account said I can. So I'm going to do it.
Girl, yes. Yeah.
Ladies, I have really enjoyed this. Is there anything that I have not asked that you guys want to share or talk about?
I think maybe just for anyone who does have questions about their faith or about how their faith is being portrayed, like, I would just hope that they would lean into that, because it's at the time, it feels like, you're leaning over a cliff and you're about to completely destroy your life.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm so grateful that I had, one, I lived in a city where I didn't know anyone at first, and then I met my husband, but also that we had COVID to really figure out what we want to do apart from any other influence. And I know that I can't take that for granted, but I would hope that, if anyone is questioning, that they would just get alone and really answer those questions themselves. Because I think it has made my life better. And, there's still some things that are really difficult and some things I still have to figure out, but I wouldn't change anything about the last 3 years for sure.
I would say one of the great things about, I guess, kind of leaving the church in general is just being able to have connections with people outside of just trying to share the gospel with them, seeing different points of views, just learning from other people. I think that's the thing that's helped me the most is talking to and learning from several different people, looking at everyone's perspective and not necessarily just looking to everybody who agrees with me. You know what I mean? I think that's helped me not just navigate life just in general by not necessarily, just understanding people and not necessarily agreeing with them. And some things you just understand, but at least there's a conversation that can be had and there's a dialogue that can be had. And I think that just opening up lines of communication and information is the most important thing when it comes to deconstructing. Or even if you're starting to question your faith, is not necessarily just keep going back to the same people again and again, your pastor, your small group leader, all this and that, but to just look at different perspectives.
That's really good, ladies. Before we're done, do you have any book recommendations, podcasts, YouTube channels, anything that you have just learned a lot from, or even just that you love?
The book that you gave me, God is a Black Woman, I haven't been able to read too much of it, but what I did read of it was so good. It makes me want to go to France and kiss the feet of the Black Madonna so badly. Like, I am like, oh my gosh, I just want to be like her.
Yes, that book is fantastic. Even if you land in a completely different place, it just, for me, in God as a Black Woman, to be able to create God in your own image was like, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
I love this.
And there's several Black Madonnas around it. And I was like, I didn't even know that. That's amazing. That's amazing.
I read The Color of Compromise pretty early on in 2020, and I thought that was a pretty good. I think it's really good for Christians just to understand, and I think that was something that really launched me into realizing maybe I don't belong in a church that is predominantly white. Because in it talks about just how racism was spurred on by white women, white stay-at-home moms. And I think that in some ways it made me a lot more hardened to the white church, but also just looking back and seeing maybe, these people were wrong. And but even just beyond that, I think it's a good book. I think it, like I said, it if someone is white and they're questioning why Black and brown people are so upset in the church, that's what I would recommend first and foremost. And then I would say, as hard as it is and as uncomfortable as it is sometimes, listen to people who are different than you. And I think that's another frustration for me is I thought I had all of these friends who, when I was expressing my pain, would listen, and they have not. So, bare minimum, I think just listen to people who, if they're telling you what's wrong, the least you can do is just listen.
Listen, hear people's stories, even if it does not match up with your experience.
May I also recommend another book?
Please.
So there's a book called Taming the Tiger Within by, I forgot, I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah, thank you. And they're meditations on transforming difficult emotions. And, during deconstruction, during life, you're going to have a lot of difficult emotions. And I feel like this book has helped me a lot with just, it's just everyday meditations just to accept your emotions and work through them and how to react to them. Because it's an emotional roller coaster. All of this is, and you just don't know exactly what to do with them. But you take care of it. You take care of it like it's your baby, So yes, take care of your emotions. So I would definitely recommend Taming the Tiger Within for people.
Well, ladies, Marissa and Raven, I have had so much fun. This has been wonderful. I really enjoyed it. And thank y'all so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Final thoughts on the episode. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I often pontificate quite a bit in this section, but I think Marissa and Raven have spoken so eloquently about their experience. Similar to what Arline expressed in the interview, I'm continually amazed at how oblivious I have been during my time in and out of the church. The experience of Marissa and Raven is completely different from my experience, and it's so important that they were here to tell their stories, and I really appreciate them. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things, and then mostly I'm going to say thank you. Marissa, I really appreciated, she talks about the exception to the rule that she could only find. The exception was if you're not white, and the experience of watching the tragic killings of young Black men and women and not getting any empathy is just heart-rending and soul-crushing. I also appreciated Marissa's statement that for her, she never doubted who God was, but she doubted who people had told her God was. And I think that was a really eloquent way of saying that. I was struck by Raven's moment of reflection when somebody suggested that the campus ministry could be a cult, and that had been the first time that she considered that as a possibility, as well as, similar to Marissa, recognizing the hypocrisy when it came to race. This is why it is so important to have representation of all experiences, of all people. I want to thank Marissa and Raven for telling their stories, being very honest with us about their experiences, about landing in different places and being okay with that. And I definitely want to thank Arline for hosting this week. I hope Arline will be willing to do more hosting. Her voice is significant and important as well. Thank you to the three of you for this very important episode. We have a number of interviews coming up that I am excited to share with you. And until then, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. Time for the footnotes. The beat is called Waves from Mackay Beats. Links will be in the show notes. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can promote it on your social media. You can subscribe to it in your favorite podcast application, and you can rate and review it on podchaser.com. You can also support the podcast by clicking on the affiliate links for books on gracefulatheist.com. If you have podcast production experience and you would like to participate with the podcast, please get in touch with me. Have you gone through a faith transition and do you need to tell your story? Reach out. If you are a creator or work in the deconstruction, deconversion, or secular humanism spaces and would like to be on the podcast, just ask. If you'd like to financially support the podcast, there's links in the show notes. To find me, you can Google Graceful Atheist. You can Google deconversion. You can Google secular grace. You can send me an email, gracefulatheist@gmail.com, or you can check out the website, gracefulatheist.com. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. This has been the Graceful Atheist Podcast.